Good one. It's a big topic. It's one for the entire industry, but I think live service gaming is particularly affected by this one. And it's where are we getting new players? Where are we able to get existing players from existing games to support what we hold dear in live service gaming? Obviously, we've got to make profitable games, but we also want to build strong communities, and that obviously requires a lot of people. And we're a bit of our own worst enemy. We design our games to be very sticky, to engage our players for a long time. And that means that when a new game comes out, you've got to prize them away from somewhere where a player's invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of their social networks are. So I think that as we go into 2025 with a global video game user base, especially outside of mobile, which is fairly static right now. So we've got to look very carefully at what are the things that we're doing that are innovative? What are the things that we're doing that really appeal to an existing audience who maybe are wavering? How do we enable communities to move so that you can bring your social networks with you to this new great experience? And I think the way that we look after the share of available dollars, pounds, whatever it may be, it's becoming a real issue that we have to think about. Just making a good game is no longer enough there. You've got to get players to play that great game. So I think that's a big challenge for all of us to look at. Again, not limited to the live gaming area, but certainly it's a topic we need to think about as we move towards launch, which is how are we actually going to accommodate those things? And the holy grail, which is how do you bring new people into live service gaming? How do you bring new players who aren't already attached to an existing game? I think that's going to be a big thing for us to think about as we go through 2025. I think it's bringing a lot of things which the audience at this conference, people who've been working in live service gaming for a long time now have always taken for granted. And it's that long-term engagement. How do you create a game which is going to keep an audience focused on the content that you're putting out? That is something which all of the publishers, whether they're making live service games, whether they're making single player games or whatever, are looking at. You're seeing a lot of transmedia efforts now where people are going outside of video games in order to keep an audience. You can look at the success of The Last of Us on TV, the Fallout TV show. These are not necessarily live service games, but publishers realize that they need to do the things that live service games do, which is how do I keep a player for months, years, because user acquisition costs are getting a lot harder. So I think that's one thing. I think there's also a thing which is now happening that's affecting the games industry, which is how do you manage these long-term operations when they're hitting sort of decades of time there? We've seen studios which churn out a game every 3, 4, 5 years, move on to the next one, move on to the next one. I think live service gaming is forcing the overall industry to think more about how do you create a career for a developer in a single studio when that game could probably be running for 10, 15, 20 years. I've been really lucky. I've worked on 2 games, one of which has just crossed into working, being in operation for a decade. Another one which has been in operation for over 2 decades. And the problems, not problems, but the issues that brings up are very different than ones that the rest of the game industry used to see. And now we're seeing that those kind of things are permeating everywhere. How do we make those long-term pieces? And that's forcing not just the live service games, but the whole industry to really focus on some of the things that other industries have done. So I think it's pulling those things in. And then final one really is live service gaming. I think it's affecting the rest of the industry because at one point everybody wanted to be a live service game. Everybody saw that as the sort of the panacea for all the ills. How do we turn everybody towards that? So actually what I think it's doing is I think it's giving a bit of fresh air into what we would call old school kind of traditional games. You can see that there are relatively short single player games which are beginning to get traction. Recently, you can look at something like the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game that came out, which is almost the antithesis of live service gaming. And I think people are realizing there's an audience for that. It's almost like a breath of fresh air from the, oh, I've got to invest the next 3 years of my life in this game. So I think what it's really doing is it's showing that there is a huge audience for a lot of different things out there. And I think we need to take that into account as we're doing these games. I think you need to look at the last bit of that, which is how do you make a thriving player community? And that has to come first and foremost before anything, before you can even think about getting monetizing or not monetizing. You've got to have people who are having a shared experience. And I think one of the most powerful things we do in live service gaming, which are multiplayer, is that shared meaningful experience. It was really the cornerstone of what we did at EVE Online, which was how do you make things meaningful when you have these player-to-player interactions? And so I think first and foremost, you need to make a great game which enables that, enables those sort of networking effects. I think at that point, once you've got people enjoying playing the game, I think optional monetization is one expected. It's not a thing where people are amazed that it's in your game. And as what's the word? So I guess as sensible employers, we've also got to worry about where the money's coming in from. And I think some of the pushback from developers and publishers around taking evil money from people has kind of gone. We all like to put shoes on our kids' feet. So I think at that point, it's really a case of optional, allowing people to invest in their hobby. If they've already paid money up front, how do you enable them to augment that experience by spending? It's a really weird thing we have in the video game industry. If you look at most hobbies, I do a talk on this actually, about fishing, going angling, going fishing. It's a free-to-play game. You can get a stick, you can get a string, and you can get a nail, and you can drop it in a river, you can go fishing. You might have to buy a license to be allowed to, but you can do that free-to-play. And you walk down any sporting goods store here in America, and you can spend 10 grand on a carbon fiber rod. But not everybody can afford that. So is that an unfair advantage? There are parallels to that. But the reason people pay $10,000 for a carbon fiber rod is because a few people are going to want to invest in their hobby. They enjoy spending money to have a better experience or a different experience, or just to get the Gucci fishing rod. It's exactly the same in our video games. And I think we need to give people that opportunity to invest in their hobbies, especially as we're looking at engagement and retention. I think that enables people to feel good about what the experience they're having. And then if you can build that into community as well, we're seeing a lot of things now. Hey, I can buy this thing and it helps all of my friends. I think mechanics like that enable us to just build on the experiences and the community that we build in our games anyway. I think there's a few things to help with that. I think the first one is to listen to them. I think probably the most underrated people in video gaming are our community teams. I think it's really important to find the right ways to have people listening and engaging with your community outside of the game and inside of the game, obviously, and find a way to channel that through to development and publishing teams. Every single game I've worked on, the community team are some of your most dedicated employees, are some of the people who care most about your game and its effect on your players. So I think having a really good community team is essential. It gives you that two-way conduit of being able to listen, to being able to synthesize that feedback, but also to be able to communicate back why you as a team or as a developer are making the decisions you're doing. So I think that's super important, not just around monetization. And I mean, in terms of keeping it relevant, I think you have to look widely in the industry and beyond it. You've got to look at what are all the different ways that people are putting monetization strategies in. Why are they doing them? Where are they egregious? Where should we pull back from some of the different ones? I think localization is really important. What is acceptable in some parts of the world is completely unacceptable in others. There's a lot of emotion built around that, but you still need to be aware of both the strategies and then how they intersect with player expectations. And you get that by looking at other people's games. I think there's an awful lot of borrowing, sharing, we'll put it that way, across the industry, which is really important. You also have to be innovative, but that's hard to plan. It's hard to prep. It's difficult to suddenly go, I should come up with a new monetization strategy today. We did it for 10 years on Elder Scrolls Online and still going. And those guys have come up with some innovative things, and they've borrowed an awful lot of existing things. I think it's consult widely, pray that inspiration strikes, but also listen to your players. Have a really good community team. I'm not sure it's about overcoming them to maintain long-term player engagement. I think when players value the things that they can buy, or whatever it is they're doing, it could be a subscription, it could be their time. Time is their most important asset. When they value that, when the game is worth that spend on their part, then I think players don't have a problem with it. So it's less sort of overcoming it. It's how do you develop these things? It has to be very game specific. How a player and a community enjoys your game is very specific to your game. People talk about no pay to win, which is a very Western kind of idea. It's much more sort of acceptable in other parts of the world. But when they say no pay to win, well, what does win mean? It's completely dependent on what your game is. Some things may be acceptable in some games that aren't in others. So I think you've got to sort of be very cognizant of those sorts of things. Good friend of mine, a guy called Lee Rideout, who has done a lot of monetization on some of the games I've worked on. Lee's always had this mantra, which has really stuck with me, which I think is something which is one of those things that helps you come up with those strategies, which is something for every play style, something for every budget. Most of our games have many different ways to play them, and we have a very wide range of players who don't want to spend a penny, players who really want to invest in their hobby. I think by looking at giving choice, I think that's probably the biggest strategy you can have to be successful, which is give your players as much choice as possible, from nothing to, yeah, I really value this. This is something that I want to invest in. This is something that I find worthwhile in my spend, be it time or be it money. And I think in terms of a strategy, that something for every playstyle, something for every budget means that you are able to deliver something which your community is going to not find egregious within the context of what your game is and how they want to spend it. One, speak to a lot of people who have been really founders of this industry. Austin's kind of the home of live service gaming. There's a lot of old timers down there who should be at the conference. So it'll be great to meet up with some of them. Some of them I've worked with, some of them I've heard about. So it'll be great to kind of meet those people. It's going to be great to feel the pulse of where everybody is at. It's been an interesting few years. We've had one of the most engaged periods of time when we had COVID. We've come out of that. There have then been, I wouldn't say contractions, but there have certainly been some challenges that we've had in the industry since then, as growth has sort of plateaued. But I know that there's a lot of ideas on how to to get that rolling again. So it'd be great to have those conversations. And finally, it's going to be great to talk to people and find out what their games are going to be. There's a lot of new games in development, and there are some amazing ideas out there. It's going to be really, really good to see the innovation, creativity of this amazing community, and get to talk to everyone. It'll be great.